Hi, and welcome to the Distinguished Twins podcast. I am Kane.
I am Professor Anderson. This is our special guest. As you can see, we have a new individual sitting on our couch on our set today. This is Dr. Enjolie Lafaurie. She's a colleague of mine. She's a doctor and she's a professor of psychology. As you well know, I am a professor of sociology. We work at the same collegiate institution. Dr. Lafaurie and myself, being in the social sciences, is if anyone knows about psychology and sociology, they're like siblings, very closely related. So we've been able to collaborate on some things, but also one thing that really connected us initially as colleagues was our sports background. As you know, I played some football, and Dr. Lafaurie was a former athlete. She was a soccer player. So that's one of the ways that we connected as well.
Okay. And I have a question about the sports piece.
Sure.
Obviously, you're a doctor now, but you played sports into college, you said?
Early college.
Early college? Mm-hmm. And what motivated you to stop sports and pursue education?
Primarily, I had some injuries through high school, and I felt like both my coaches and my parents really didn't believe that the strength or the severity of the injury, and I knew I wasn't okay.
Yes.
I think also gender aspects come into play. So I played soccer and I, did Olympic development. Mm-hmm. However, at the time that I was playing, there really wasn't a women's league, right? There wasn't a transition. There wasn't anything to go to.
Yes.
So the only dream would have been to get my education paid for.
Yes.
I always knew that I wanted a Ph.D. And so I'm glad, thank you. It's unique that for most people, I knew when I was 13 what I wanted to do.
Wow.
And I generally didn't waver very much from that.
Yes.
So injury, thinking about that like socioeconomic stuff that I might have to finance my own education.
Yes.
It just didn't make sense anymore, you know? And I was like, I need to kind of grind and like buckle down and just focus on school, because that is what's going to be the long-term goal.
Wow. Okay, so you were 13. You were still playing soccer at that time?
Yes. That was probably at the height of Olympic stuff, yeah.
So what made you say, I'm getting a PhD? I know we spoke briefly before. I heard you were pretty good at soccer. So at that age, I'll just say we were dead set on professional football.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Education was nowhere to be found, even though we did well.
Yes.
But what made you at that age, say PhD is the goal?
So challenges, to be honest, like family challenges. I'm a really transparent person, so you're about to experience that right now. I used to listen to my parents argue, and I used to kind of coach them in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
I actually used to sit in a place where they couldn't hear me or see me, but in my mind, I would want like my dad to say this and my mom to say that instead. And so I actually was 13 saying I wanted to be a marriage therapist. So I don't know that I actually knew PhD, but I knew that this was like, there's a road, right?
Yeah.
And I have immigrant parents, right? So my dad was from Cuba, my mom's from Guatemala. So the conversation was always like, you're going to school. So it had to fit in some sort of degreed kind of context.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Right.
I know you said there wasn't a women's league at that time, but we obviously last week spoke on sports, and I know you watched that piece. And our stance was the fact that you don't need sports in order to learn crucial social development skills. Right. And so how do you feel about that? How do you feel about sports and, life itself?
Yes.
I appreciate the balance you guys have tried to have across your two shows I got to see. Like, you're trying to present both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you that it's not necessary, but I do think there's an important gender lens. I think it might be different for women, right? You know, so it is one of the places where I got to see leadership skills, right? I was always kind of a captain and things like that. And I think girls don't get as many opportunities to kind of hold those roles in classroom settings, even like on the playground. It actually made some of my male peers also respect me. Like, I remember the first time, I'm not going to name drop, but somebody who kind of played college basketball, that's who I raced when we were kids, because we went to the same school, because the girls, I was faster than the girls, right? So I needed some of this competition with boys, right? And that's a really valuable lesson to learn, to kind of how to hold your own.
Yeah,
absolutely.
With all of your peers.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So with that being said, I know you competed against the guys and, kind of, proved yourself, but do you think you need organized sports, or just if kids are just involved, and it can be recreationally? Say you go to the park,
right?
That type. Do you think organized sports gives you a different aspect rather than recreational?
I think you need achievement. So what I mean by that is I think you need to feel like you've achieved something. So if the rec leagues gives you the trophy, and you get the write-up in the newspaper, and your parents take you to go get pizza, right? Like as long as all those things where you get to celebrate yourself,
exactly.
As long as that happens, I think it's okay.
Yes.
Or I think it'd be fine. It would meet the same requirements versus organized versus rec league. So achievement is real. Like we have to eat within psychological language, like we need to self-efficacy, kind of the belief that I can set a goal, I can achieve it, and I can watch myself get better at it. So
whenever I was younger, I played American football, but I played a little bit of football, and
not the right one.
I drew many.
He's lying.
Many.
He's lying. He was never good.
I drew many comparisons to Pele.
Oh wow.
And so,
do you even know how to spell it?
Yeah, I do. But I mean, the thing for me was, do I want to play American football, or do, I want to play pretty much soccer? And I just say, you know what, I'm gonna walk away from that, and I'm just gonna go ahead and play American football. So I think I made the right decision, though.
Yeah.
The sport thanks you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Doc, I'm here to tell you that's a lie. All right. The thing was, when we were little, when we did have a soccer ball, it turned into football.
Yeah, it did.
So
every time,
actually kicking the ball was not our strength. So, we did that. But anywho,
Doc is intimidated by my skills. But okay,
really?
Yeah,
I can kind of feel that vibe.
Just a little bit of energy.
Feel that.
We're gonna find a soccer ball in a little bit.
That's it. Yeah. We'll make sure we put that on film for you. Go ahead. Yeah.
I know recently. This country celebrated National Mental Health Awareness Day.
Yes.
And we brought Doc on the show today because she is an expert in that area. Yes. And I'm going to turn it over to Doc right now and let her introduce herself and give her credentials, and we'll get into the talk about mental health because we think that's very important, especially we'll touch on sports mental health as well. Obviously, we're all former athletes, and with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Thank you. So as you said, I'm Dr. Enjolie Lafaurie. I'm a psychologist. I'm also a professor. Some of the other goodies that I have in my toolkit are I'm a hypnotherapist. I'm also a mindfulness practitioner.
Okay.
So those are the main kind of credentials that I tend to pull from the most.
Okay. Awesome. As far as mental health, when I can't say word, those two words are mentioned, what do you think as a professional? And then I'll tell you what I think just as a non-professional. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I immediately go to thinking what I think other people think, right?
Okay.
So I wish they thought well-being. I wish they thought emotional well-being, mental well-being,
yes.
Even spiritual well-being.
Yes.
I wish they thought about like, how do I maintain that just like I maintain a muscle?
Yes. Okay, yes.
I like that.
I wish they had more information about it of like, what is, like what you're asking me right now, what is it?
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, that's fantastic because initially, I like when you said maintain it, because I've been thinking about mental health, obviously, because it's a hot topic in this country for the past couple years. Obviously, we struggle as a country, definitely.
Yes.
And when I hear mental health, for me, I think naturally, because of where we come from, a lot of people don't seek mental health.
Yes.
And so immediately my thought goes to, because people don't seek mental health, the term that's thrown around a lot when it comes to people struggling mentally is crazy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm. And mental health assistance, absolutely. And,
yes.
And to just touch on that really quickly, with the time of year.
Yes.
Here we are here comes Halloween, and I'm sure a lot of places I've already seen Christmas decorations. And here comes Thanksgiving. Well, this is a time of year, it's the holiday season where a lot of people are stressed out. A lot of people are dealing with the fact of, okay, here comes Christmas. I have to buy gifts. I have to work overtime. A lot of people are going to be looking to take up additional jobs just so that they can go ahead and fulfill those needs for their loved ones. Well, this is a time of year where depression increases, and a lot of people are just going to be battling anxiety and so on and so forth. So we felt that it was extremely appropriate to touch on mental health, and especially after Kane just mentioned, we just had Mental Health Awareness Day, which just passed. So again, when you're talking about seeking mental health assistance, like you said, a lot of people do throw that crazy word out there.
Yes.
And so, which delves directly into the topic of stigma.
Yes.
And so whenever you hear that word stigma and you hear the crazy word thrown out, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah.
Well, and even I want to add to around the holidays,
Yes.
just grief. So it's a time when people miss one another.
There you go.
And it's a time where you're around family.
True.
And as
Bottom line.
amazing as most of us wish our family was, like, you guys are brothers, you get along. I
Yes.
get along with my siblings.
Yeah, I mean, hardly, but go ahead. Yeah.
Pretend. We're
Right, exactly.
We have to do it for the show.
Exactly.
Good job.
Yes.
I'm gonna break up the fight later.
Yes.
Okay. But anyway, if people don't get along with their family, it introduces a lot of stress of maybe things that they've pushed aside because they're having to face it. So, but yeah, the big one is grief, missing people, missing who's not around at a Christmas tree, who's not around at Thanksgiving time.
Yes.
So I agree with everything you said. I would just
Absolutely.
add that.
Yes.
And, absolutely.
Yeah, related to crazy. That's when you asked me the question. Like, when somebody says mental health, I think they immediately go to what we would call pathology, right? And so pathology is all the abnormal stuff, right? It is the anxiety, the depression, or even worse. I think a lot of times people also think of maybe somebody who's shot up a building, and they assume that they know, what the diagnosis is, or they assume that that person has mental health issues.
Exactly.
So
Bottom line.
immediate correlation that's not necessarily true.
Yes.
Which is in the sociological realm, it's called the medicalization of deviance, right? And so, automatically we think that someone has, something going on mentally that, it's very disturbing and they're just not normal or balanced. And we oftentimes disregard the social aspects which help to contribute to such behavior. So I think that personally, you're a psychologist, me being a sociologist, I think that there needs to be much more research done from a sociological perspective as to why we have mass shooters. But I think in this country, everything is so individualized, and we act as if, well, that's just a lone wolf, and they just have an issue. Whereas in some other demographics, it's just, it's all of them. Yeah. And so, again, from a sociological perspective, I would love to conduct some research on that. As to why we do have, such, chaos going on in those realms.
And as hard of a time as you and I give each other, this is actually it's a good way to kind of bring together both psychology and sociology.
Exactly.
Because just to define, right, psychology is looking at human behaviors, looking at human emotions, cognition, which are thoughts, right, mental processes, right, and the sociologist, you're looking at more of the systems that support an issue, that support some sort of issue we're facing, right, in society.
Exactly.
But they need to come together, and especially in courses that I teach, like related to culture and some of the sociology courses you teach. Yes. We need to talk about both aspects because if we don't, we're going to miss something important. And my students, when the kind of mental health and mass shootings comes into the conversation, they often want to pathologize, right? They want to assume that somebody's maybe schizophrenic. That's probably the most common one, which if they only knew that, like, people who are schizophrenic are more likely to harm themselves versus someone else, right? It would take a lot to put together a plan like that, right? For somebody who's struggling that much to kind of have clarity within their thoughts.
Okay, you're right.
I like that.
So with that being said, that made me think about the movie Split. What did he suffer from?
I don't know the movie.
It was
split personality
multiple
disorder
personality.
or multiple personality
multiple
disorder.
personalities.
Got you.
30-some-odd personalities or something like that?
23 or something like that. Or something like that.
So yes. they're only about 1% of the population has multiple personality disorder.
Right.
The same thing, you teach an intro to psych course and the people are most interested in that phenomenon.
Of course.
Kind of older examples are like Sybil or
Yeah,
just
yeah, there
all
you
these
go.
other movies.
Exactly.
But no, it's actually really rare. There's another show that I cannot think of the name right now, but a character, the main character, she struggled with multiple personality disorder.
Okay.
It was actually done really well.
Okay.
But yeah, so usually we also think about when someone's in the legal system trying to get off is with an
true.
explanation of multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
Super, super rare, exceptionally rare.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that isn't, but if your connection was, people don't know that they
Yes.
slipped into that other personality.
So, what's the difference between multiple personality and schizophrenia?
So schizophrenia, it's a thought disorder, and a thought disorder means that you're having typically some sort of sensory experience about that's a break with reality.
Right.
So I think I'm hearing something that's not there. I think I'm feeling something that's not there.
Okay.
Paranoia is one of the most common features.
Yeah.
So I think the aliens are out to get me, which they might be, but
right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
but when it gets to the point of impacting your functioning, to the
Yes.
point where you can't hold a job, you can't go outside,
Yeah.
you're straining kind of the relationships that you're having with family members and friends, that's when it's obviously too much. There's lots of features, right? But essentially the big one with schizophrenia is a break with reality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then multiple personality disorder is taking on different personas. And I just want to throw this in. That is most often going to occur around some sort of trauma, especially early trauma.
Okay.
It's not exclusive to that, but that's common. So no, not everyone who has early trauma has multiple personality disorder,
right.
but a lot of people with multiple personality disorder have a lot of experienced and survived a lot of severe trauma.
Oh, wow.
Which makes sense. Which does
Wow.
make sense.
Because actually in the movie Split, his mom, I don't know exactly what she did to him, but I know when she would call his name, he would get like, that's when he would snap out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His name was Kevin or something.
Yeah.
Kevin Windlecrum or something like that. But
Right.
anywho, since I'm talking about movies, you said something about hypnotherapy.
I did.
The movie Get Out.
I was gonna steal your thunder. Yes.
Right?
I don't have a saucer. I don't have a spoon.
Yes.
Yeah. It
So you're
doesn't
saying
work
that's
that
not
way.
real?
That's not real.
I think it's real, but go ahead.
I mean,
Could it be real
No, I'm joking.
with conditioning?
I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Any way that somebody can relax.
Yes.
Right.
We can pair, right? So it's classical conditioning. We can pair any stimulus with any response.
Yes.
Okay.
This fancy language there. Anyway, I didn't exactly.
I love it.
But
Yeah.
so we can pair anything that's not the most common pairing.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I'm like, when I saw the movie, obviously everybody saw it, and I'm just thinking to myself, what if somebody really was able to get me to that state?
Right.
But when it comes to hypnotherapy, do you have to be willing?
yes.
Okay, in order for someone to actually get you to that point.
Yeah. So and even staying on the train of movies, right?
Right.
A lot of movies actually depict hypnosis and hypnotherapy in really extreme ways, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
typically kind of this, it's called an automon, right? So this idea that the hypnotherapist is kind of coming in and taking over your brain, right?
Yes, yes.
It's really like that narrative of like even alien abduction, right?
Right.
But instead of it being an outside alien, it's another person.
Okay.
And there's a lot of reasons why. We can go into that, but let me get out the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
part. But anyway, so that's usually how it's depicted. So no, all hypnosis is actually self-hypnosis.
Okay.
When it started, kind of, I'm trying not to nerd out on you guys, but when it started here in the U.S., initially it did come with this really authoritarian, like, this is what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
So like example, I had a client one time tell me, like, my dad said that you could make me stop eating. You know, his goal was to lose weight. But my response to him was like, why would you want to stop eating?
Yeah,
right? I don't want that to be a goal for you.
Yeah.
But that spoke to what he knew about hypnosis,
Oh,
which is what
okay.
we hear from movies, right?
Right.
Okay.
The other thing that I want to add is that hypnosis is a really light state. It's called trance.
Okay.
So if there's a loud noise, right? If somebody kind of walks by, like if I move around, you can hear my bracelets. When I do a session, I take them off
Right.
because that's going to bother my client and pull them out. So it's an exceptionally light space.
Ah.
Like I don't know what it was called in Get Out, the
Sunken
room.
place.
Sunken place.
Yeah, there we go.
There's no sunken place. There's no sunken place.
Okay.
I don't
If
know
you
about
could
that.
go there, people would stay there.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I don't know. We may have some people in the sunken place. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
walking sunken place people for sure.
Yeah,
But-
some celebrities who support certain political figures. But go ahead.
wow.
Yeah. We won't.
I mean, but that's like our definition of a sunken place.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm joking.
very good.
Okay.
Right.
I
Correct
just,
him all day long.
yeah.
Yeah.
no.
Then see, and
Well, no. I mean, I was thinking about that.
you're
I'm
trying to
like,
be all technical. Just slow down. Just,
I
go
was
ahead.
talking about
Yeah.
him correcting you, but okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't trying to be too technical, but I you made me think about that one.
And you know what? I actually, to more so get back on just the seriousness of mental health.
Yes.
And a lot of my research, I conduct a lot of research on the African American population, and one thing that I came across was that amongst the African American population, we tend to have elevated levels. I believe a figure that I came across is roughly about 33% higher levels of depression and PTSD. And of course, with our history in this country, if you look around the country, as far as crime and violence, we've had a lot of that as, over years of redlining being relegated and subjugated to ghettos, right? And so you have the crime and you have the high violence, you have so many different factors which help to contribute to such behaviors. But one of the biggest things, especially, we come from East St. Louis, Illinois, and if you were to ever take a drive through East St. Louis, Illinois, you're going to see an abundance of liquor stores, maybe fast food places or what have you. But the one thing you're going to see is a lack of mental health facilities.
Yes.
And so I believe that we share this belief, is that as often as you see a gas station, you should see a mental health facility.
Yes.
Because that's how important mental health truly is. That's how important we believe that it is, as far as if you want to help a population recover, regroup, and actually start to heal and improve, it has to start there.
Yes.
And so what's your take on that? And also, what tips would you give, let's say, individuals who come from marginalized communities and may hail from impoverished conditions, to where they don't necessarily have the means to have insurance to seek actual professional mental health assistance right now? So what type of tips would you give them, and what are your thoughts about the elevated levels of depression and PTSD, and what are your thoughts about those things?
And let me chime. Sure. Can you touch on your thoughts about the elevated levels, and then give us the tips second, please?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
That's what I said, but go ahead.
Well,
Yes.
you put them in
Okay.
reverse though. You
No, I
said
didn't.
tips.
No, I didn't. But
You
go
said
ahead.
tips.
No.
I got it.
Right. Thanks, Doc.
Yeah,
hey,
I got it.
listen, slow down, okay? That's my second one. Hey, that's right too. All right, let's go, Doc.
Oh, so let's see. I have a lot of thoughts. So my first thought is actually a thought I hope you appreciate, related to systems. So,
Okay, yes.
especially as we were talking about schizophrenia and some of the severe mental health disorders.
Yes.
Kind of think about 80s, kind of Reagan era is when we started to see the shutting down actually of these clinics and that were more prevalent. And we just, our healthcare system changed. And there are a lot of mental health issues that if you can take your medication, right, if you can also have the support of talk therapy, that you can do well. But often people who are struggling with these disorders, they have poor medical management, right? So they don't stay on their pill. They don't continue to take their pills.
Exactly.
And so just having somebody check in, right, an accountability partner, that's trained to kind of assess you, right?
Yes.
Is the ideal. But as soon as that went away, there were other things that happened, right, during that era around like criminalization, right, of certain communities.
Yes.
So is this unfortunate marriage, right?
Yes.
Oftentimes, even within the criminal justice system, a lot of people experience what are called comorbidity. So it's multiple issues, right? So it's PTSD, it's substance abuse, it's the anxiety and depression, and it's the only way that I know how to make it, right, to make this decision.
Yeah. And which again, you're talking about Reagan. Here comes the crack era, right? Exactly.
So it was a perfect storm, right?
Yes, it was.
Perfect storm to criminalize what is maybe actually a mental health issue.
Bottom line, which we're seeing more recently because of the meth epidemic.
Yes.
Now we want to take it as a mental health, you know, and opioids. Now we want to look at it as a mental health issue, and now we have, you know, politicians stepping up and saying, you know, this isn't about, you know, criminalization. This is about mental health, and you know, we need to help these people as opposed to throwing them in prison cells. And so, but that same love wasn't shown whenever the crack era hit, and it just decimated and placed the many African American communities into disrepair, and still struggling to recover from that now. But go ahead.
Yeah, and also kind of nothing on the back end either, as far as maybe trying to kind of clear records, right? Or
bottom line.
The impact of kind of being involved, right, and impacted by the criminal justice system.
Bottom line.
To go to the historical piece, which you wanted me to talk about too.
Yes.
Yes, that's real, and that's actually one of my areas of like interest. So the neuropsychology behind PTSD, right, behind some of our reactions. So to kind of even bring in a sports example, our brains work like our muscles, right? So if sometimes we feel like we can bench press, right, like 100 pounds of fear, and we can only bench press like 5 pounds of joy. It's a muscle, right? It's a muscle, and I always kind of use my hands of like gripping, right? So the more repetitive times you're able to access joy, happiness, relaxation, that muscle can kind of grow in your brain. And then the one that makes it easier for you to kind of grab onto fear, paranoia, anxiety, that will shrink the less you use it. But the more fearful, the more like we're living at under poverty levels, the more we have to fight and stress and you know, kind of to make ends meet. We're just constantly, so many people and so many groups are living in this constant state of fear. So it's easier to pick up on the cues of danger than it is to pick up on the cues of relaxation. And you know, again, I could nerd out like for a long time, and I won't.
Nerd out, man. Give it to
I'll tell you one more thing. We actually can see changes in DNA strands. So, and so they're kind of the caps of the DNA strands called telomeres. So what's significant about that is if our DNA can change with trauma, and then we procreate, that means that we're actually also passing on a predisposition for an anxiety, a predisposition for depression. But there are things you can do about it.
And I've seen research on that because of the impact of slavery. And so I've seen research on that, and I also saw some research on how, and this was really, it was loosely based, but I was reading an article about how some African Americans fear like wooded areas, like because it may just be, you know, a part of your DNA because of whatever your ancestors went through, it was very interesting. So, you know, and that DNA is a very new concept, right? And because we now have the technology to actually study it like we want to. So that is very interesting.
And that's actually what I like. You didn't ask me this, but somebody asked like, where do I think the field is going? I think that's what's exciting to me, that the things that the field saw in a theoretical way, just through observation, now with brain research and neuroscience, we're actually able to pinpoint like, oh, this is a thing, and this is the thing that happens right here. Because I remember being a student actually reading kind of health disparity information and looking at black and brown folks, and I remember reading it, saying to myself like, all this stuff, right? Racism, all the isms, sexism, oppression, it's actually harming our health. But there wasn't anything in neuropsych literature that said that to me, right? That's just my experience, right? As a black and brown individual, recognizing what goes on. Now that I see the telomere research, right? Now that I see neuropsych talking about microaggressions and trauma, it's exactly what I was seeing years ago. So it's very validating. And I can, you know, segue back into so then what do you do, right?
Exactly. What do you do?
Before that, I have a question. So if you see the DNA, you know, change where you're predisposed to anxiety and things of that nature, what do you think? Do you think when people say hate is not
taught?
They say it's always taught.
It's
not in you, right?
It's not innate to you.
What do you think about that? Because I'll say that because I looked at some research on mice, right? And it showed that if you take 2 mice and the one mouse finds its way through this maze, much faster than the other, that the offspring will kind of replicate that same, I guess, what can I say?
Like they'll have the same pattern.
That same pattern,
excel.
that ability to do so, and their offspring will finish faster. It's almost like with athletes. Like when we were being interviewed by the NFL, one of the main things they wanted to know was, do you have family in the NFL? They want to know your pedigree, right?
Exactly.
You know, are you kind of predisposed to being an elite athlete?
Exactly.
So what do you think about hate being taught, or is it
innate? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do I got your question.
Right.
So how do I bring together like my whole psychoculture
Yeah,
class
exactly,
in 5 minutes? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So this is how I'm going to start. So yes, human beings, we are predisposed to protect ourselves.
Yes.
We're predisposed to recognize a threat.
Okay.
Yes.
And then through socialization, which is a psychological theory versus sociological.
Is it really?
Albert Bandura was a psychologist.
Yes, Bandura, actually, yeah. I actually used his one of his theories, but go ahead.
Resilience.
In my research, yeah.
Anyway, so this is some intellectual jockeying here.
Right. Yeah. Professor talk right here. I can't get in on that. I'm just a loser, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting by. But go ahead.
He's right.
We are the losers.
Go ahead, Doc.
We're addressing because we just lost everybody. Okay. Anyway,
Go ahead, Doc.
so hate. That's it.
Right.
What people understand. Hate.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, sadly we are predisposed. We're predisposed to kind of see divisions. We're predisposed to kind of categorize information, which leads us to categorize people.
Right.
Our brain wants to be as efficient. I call it lazy, right?
Right.
As lazy as possible. So we don't want to have to think about things frequently, which is then where I think you're getting to, which is why we stereotype, right?
Exactly.
Which is why we kind of act differently with other
Bottom
people.
line.
Yes.
That shouldn't be an excuse to keep doing it. There's
Correct.
tons
Exactly.
of ways to remedy that.
Yes.
Because it is a laziness. There's so much more our brains could do.
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Right?
See, that was a thought that I had, and I just knew it. I'm like,
There you go, scholar. There
You know?
yeah, right? You know,
I mean, you're not
you
that
act
much
like
of a loser.
well, you act like
No,
you're
no.
not, pursuing your degrees.
Very
yeah.
smart.
I mean, you know, but
So, what about the tips? What,
Yeah.
what would you tell people? And like, how do you manage until you can get
Yes.
to a place where you may be able to afford professional help?
yes.
So, my immediate reaction is one of like sadness. I'm thinking of clients. I'm thinking of like how real it is
Right.
to have clients that had multiple issues going on, and me even on the practitioner side, sitting there thinking like, what do I tell you when
Right.
you're like trying to pay your bills,
Yeah.
you're dealing with mental health issues,
Right.
you're living in a far away, right? You're doing and you're trying to be a full-time student and a full-time employee.
Yes.
Exactly.
So what I would say is basic as it seems, is that if you can teach yourself to engage a relaxation response,
Okay.
that's going to be the most helpful.
Okay.
Break that down a little bit more.
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
can.
So a relaxation response is, if you think about a stress response, we know that. We know
Yes.
fight, flight, freeze, right?
Right.
There's some other ones, but those are the primary ones.
Exactly.
A relaxation response is the opposite, right?
Right.
It's release, right?
Yes.
It's a lack of constriction. It's you being able to take a fuller breath.
Okay.
When you yawn, when you stretch, right? You
Right.
can't make your body do those things. You can't tell your heartbeat to beat a little bit faster,
Yes,
right?
right.
So when you access all the involuntary systems in your body,
Right.
that's a relaxation response.
Okay.
The things that get you there are actually like free and easy, right? We just have to learn them.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's
Such as.
yoga, meditation, deep breaths. That's where the mindfulness piece of what I do comes in, right?
Okay.
Teaching people really simple techniques that
Right.
if they practice, they can very quickly and
Yes.
consciously activate that relaxation response.
Okay.
Okay.
Even prayer, right? So
Yes.
we haven't talked about religion, and we should on
Yes.
this topic.
Yes.
But anything. So not all religion,
Right.
not all prayer. So
Exactly.
it needs to be non-fear based. They're
Oh,
called
man.
contemplative practices. So journaling. I would even say physical things, exercise, right?
Yes.
Dance, right? Movement of the body.
Okay.
Things can also be communal, right? So, but anything that gets you to like take that deep
Yes.
breath, relax, your shoulders drop. That's as much as you can practice your body being able to recognize that.
Yes.
Right.
If I could only teach people one thing, it would always be that.
Okay.
Exactly.
but the I want to say, the limit of my field, right? Why you don't like psychologists is because we put everything at the individual
I love
level.
psychologists.
Anyway, we put everything at the individual level. So I think in that example, I would also want to help this client or this individual kind of get their basic needs met.
Right. Yes.
Because if you have to pay your bills, if you have to take care of your child, if you have to kind of figure out shelter and safety, there's no room, there's no capacity for to kind of even give your mental health time and attention.
Yeah, I mean,
or little room.
And to clarify, I don't dislike psychologists.
Yeah,
I just I feel that, and we've had this discussion before, that on any typical college campus, you're gonna find an abundantly more availability of psychology courses.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. And then you're not gonna find as many sociological courses. And I would say this, and I say this, and I have a theory on it. And I believe that as a society, if we can convince everyone that the problems that you have are just solely just confined to just you as an individual, then we don't have to address the bigger issues on a larger scale. And so for me, as a sociologist, I can sit back and look at the way that these institutions influence human behavior. And so I can look at how the education system can influence little girls to believe that they will not grow up to become doctors, or they won't grow up to become the president one day, or what have you. I can look at those systems and see how it can influence the way that we think, right? And so even again, on the mass shooter side of things, I think that if we look at it as an individual thing, we don't have to address the way that we've created a culture in this country to where there's a sense of entitlement. There's a sense of superiority to where, some individuals feel like, okay, well, if I'm superior to these beings, then it's my responsibility to engage in ethnic cleansing. And let's make sure we clear this space out or what have you. And so it's not necessarily I'm just mentally ill. I feel like I have an obligation because of the way that I've been socialized to think. And so again, I think sociologically speaking, I think that we can address a lot of our larger issues, but at the same time, you can't do it without psychology. And I always tell my students that, and I'm sorry, I always deviate sometimes, but I always tell my students that you can't have one without the other. Because yes, we have these nefarious aspects of these larger institutions in this country, but an institution is these institutions are simply abstract entities. They're abstract entities. They don't work without people.
Yes.
And so in order for it to work, you need people, and here comes psychology, right? And so they go hand in hand with one another. So I don't dislike psychology at all. I love psychology. But I do believe that from my research, as you know, a lot of the research that I'm looking at, it focuses on the sociology of why certain individuals behave certain ways and may lack that self-efficacy, right? Bandura, right? They may lack that self-efficacy in certain areas. So, that's where I am on that. But to get back to your point, as far as the tips on mental health, I think that, those are very good tips. I mean, because again, a lot of people don't understand. When you can understand that, because I was reading an article as well that stated that roughly about 80% of our thoughts are negative. And most of that is because we're always in a constant state of protection, right? And so we fear things. We're always looking at things, assessing things, and saying, okay, how can I protect myself in this situation? So, now that, of course, when you look at the research, you begin to understand, like, okay, we are predisposed to think this way. But like you say, you have to kind of train your mind to engage in and employ that relaxation response as opposed to the fear response that we typically do have.
And we can grow back, right? We can grow back the telomeres, those caps at the end of the DNA strands through these contemplative practices.
Right.
Same thing I was saying that, kind of gym, weightlifting response, right?
Yes.
It's a muscle. The brain is a muscle. Our responses are a muscle.
Yeah.
And then also you all were talking about last show, I had one show,
Yes.
nature versus nurture, right?
Yes,
Which is, I think,
nature
is
versus
essentially what you were saying. So yeah, we
Yes.
need both, right?
Yes, we do.
As much as we like to give each other a time.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, right?
I think it's awesome. Just from my perspective, I think this is rich information, honestly, because, as much as, because I wanted to kind of spin off onto, as much as, we consume social media on a daily basis. It's so much negative. And I feel like it's so much negative because that's what we respond to. Now,
bottom line,
why do we, as a collective people, as a majority, why do we, respond more to the negative rather than positive things that are shared?
Exactly.
Okay, so let me go two ways with that. So one is, as you were talking about social media, actually, so whenever we get like a ping in our text message or whatever, some sort of notification, the same receptors will be activated, the dopamine response, as somebody who has a substance abuse problem, right? It doesn't matter. It's all pleasure, right? So anything that provides pleasure, we are recreating that. So it's actually kind of a concern, right, for psychologists as far as how frequently we're consuming social media, and especially because social media has, we're generally kind of trying to seek or elicit feedback and approval.
Right.
Or attention.
Exactly.
Those things are not bad, but we figured out a way to make it bad.
Bottom line, exactly.
Through overconsumption, right, and being too concerned about that. So we can also go the other way, right? Let's see. Sorry, I'm missing. What was the last part of your question?
No, I'm saying why do we, why are we quick to respond to the negative rather than the positive?
Gotcha. Okay. So, all right, brain stuff. So the amygdala is an old part of our brain. And when I was talking about fight or flight or freeze, right? That part of our brain is, it's called our hindbrain. And so if you think about caveman days, we needed to know how to protect ourselves. The part of our brain that seeks relaxation is actually much younger. I want to say 15,000 years younger, but somewhere in there. So that part of our brain is less developed. Again, we can develop it, right? But we needed to be able to protect ourselves from just basically like, there's a bear, I have to be able to run, right? It's that Darwinian survival of the fittest, which I don't care for in a lot of ways, but there is some reality to that, right? The people who could recognize threat survived.
Yes, they did.
And then we played off that in a social context and made things really bad, right?
Okay. And so I don't know, like, obviously, like I said, this information is rich. I see the value in it. Obviously, you all see the value in it because of your studies. How do you think we can get people to transition to want to see the positive more than the negative?
Yeah, it's a good transition. So we're stigma, right?
Yeah,
so how do
stigma.
we destigmatize, right? How do we make it not be bad, looked at somebody being crazy? We're doing it one of the things right now, right? So we're just talking about it. And actually, let me be like nice to you guys for 2 seconds. No, I do want to be nice. I really want to applaud you guys for what you're doing, your show, everything, right?
Thank you.
And then I'll throw myself in here, right? What we're doing, like how beautiful it is to have like 3 Black and brown young individuals that are highly degreed, to have our kids watching this and other people's kids watching this, you know? So it's not small that we're the people that are talking about this, and it's because you guys did it. So
thank you.
Thank you.
All.
Thank you. Appreciate it, brother.
It's us. But it's all of us, right? It's that energy. Like it always, connects. And, But
No, it is. It is a special time for as many scary and negative things that are going on, political. This is the good stuff that's going on, that's coming out of some of the struggles we've overcome. But anyway, sorry, we're losing my train of thought on what am I responding to?
We were talking about
how can we get us to a state
where
yes. Okay. So and then talking about it. That's how
there we go.
It must have not been a genuine compliment. Okay.
See, here we go.
You know what I'm saying?
This is my natural state. I went outside of myself. Okay.
There you go. Right.
So talk about it. Stay here. Talk about
it. Exactly.
And the things that make us not talk about it, especially if we bring up like Black and brown culture, religion. I said I wanted to talk about that. We're taught to pray things away, right? We're taught to go seek your pastor. That's all good stuff. I don't say this very loudly, but I'm actually ordained, and it's an online ordination. I didn't go to seminary school, but I actually got that ordination because a lot of people would want to talk about spiritual things or metaphysical things with me, and I didn't want somebody to challenge that I shouldn't be having that conversation as a psychologist, right?
Exactly.
Let me just. That's why credentials are important. They are important. Like I said, she obviously knows what she's speaking about.
Exactly.
However, some people want you to have those credentials.
Yes.
And you want to be able to capture a bigger clientele.
Yes.
So that's important. I spoke about that last week, and that's how you distinguish yourself.
Yes.
But anywho, get back to that. That was very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, like religion, spirituality, all these cultural aspects, right?
Yes.
Help us, but they can also hurt us. So,
Yes.
not looking for easy answers, right?
Yes.
Being able to kind of sit in the gray, right?
Yeah.
Of as positive as my religiosity and my religious affiliations are,
Yeah.
how does it also harm me, or what
Yes.
is it, and not harm, what does it blind me to?
Yes.
Well, and not to cut you off, Doc. I used an analogy before, and I said it like this: I broke my leg several years ago. I didn't know my leg was broken. I stayed at home for 3 days before I actually went to the doctor. Well, when I broke my leg, of course, I was in pain, and so I went home. I elevated my leg. My wife and I, we kept ice on it. She kept giving me meds, everything, as far as like ibuprofen, right? And so I got to a place where I was comfortable, but in order for me to actually be healed, I had to seek professional help. And so for me, and not to knock anyone, for me, I saw it metaphorically as that was religion. That was me
Yes.
praying it away. Religion is going to make you comfortable
Yes.
in your discomfort, right?
Yes.
Or dysfunction or what have you. But I believe that if we really want to heal ourselves, we need to seek professional help.
Yes.
And so, again, until I went to the doctor and they told me you were probably a few days away from gangrene setting in and probably losing your leg,
Yeah.
you know, that's when reality hit me like, you need professional help.
Yes.
You can't just make yourself comfortable and everything's just going to be all fine.
Yes.
Because you have to heal that part. But go ahead.
And to pick up off that,
Yes.
so talking about like help-seeking behaviors and not shaming people, right, for
There we
doing
go.
two things: asking for help and then talking about their emotions, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
we're not in a culture that values emotions, right? We can put it to gender, right? That you have a woman here talking about emotions, and and that's not to knock you guys, but I mean that's
Of
not the
course.
first conversation y'all are
Exactly.
having. Like there's a reason for that. Men are
Yes.
taught to kind of suppress emotions.
Yes.
Cultures, right, are taught to suppress emotions
Yes.
because you just like you do it for the culture, like you're
Yeah.
just keep
It's so
going,
unfair.
right? So talking and facing kind of some of those uncomfortable feelings.
Yes.
I think when people do, they start to realize that emotions don't last for very long.
Yes.
You actually pass through them quickly.
Exactly.
But we'll spend 15 years, 30 years, however long,
Yes.
trying to fight like a 15-second experience.
Bottom
right?
line.
Ah.
Bottom line.
And that's interesting because, as a male, I play football, blah, blah, blah. I'm seen as this strong person
Yes.
and, been through a lot. And I do take pride in having strength. However, I've had experiences in the past where I've tried to be vulnerable with a female and
Now you're weak.
she looked at me as weak.
Yes.
And I felt so hurt at that time, and I felt like, okay, I'm never showing emotion again.
Exactly.
Right? And I think a lot of, I won't say a lot, but I think some men have experienced that.
Yes.
And so working collectively together, I think, obviously in society, it's okay for women to be emotional. You're expected to be emotional.
Exactly.
But if a man is emotional, like, is there, when it comes to men being emotional, when it comes to women, like psychologically, is it because maybe they think you're being too emotional or you're not being given the emotion that they want? You know what I mean? They want you to love them, but they don't want you to get depressed.
Let me break down women. Okay.
Yeah.
And we
So,
got enough time.
We got it.
all right. So I'll say it this way. I think we're all in boxes, right? And so we have this masculinity box and we have this femininity box.
Okay.
Yes.
And the masculinity box only allows for two primary emotions, right?
Yes.
Which I teach in my gender courses. So it's kind of fear, or
Yes.
scratch that. Anger, not
Yes.
fear.
Yes.
So anger, really, and lust, right? So
Yes.
that's all kind of a man is able to display.
Wow.
Women get to display all the other emotions
Yes.
except those two, right?
Right.
So she's called bossy. She's called other B words,
Or the
right?
B word,
She's
exactly.
called, right? I don't even know if I S words, right? So,
Right.
she's called loose, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
You can say that.
Slut. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
It's like,
Yes.
yeah, she's so for wanting to have a fulfilling experience, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, we've drawn those boxes. Society has decided what emotions. There isn't any difference between you and I in the emotions that we can feel, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so we socialize one another. So it's our parents, it's our peers, it's
our
our
religion.
siblings, it's our relationships. Absolutely.
And our religion as
it's
well.
Our religion.
Certainly.
Religions, right?
Religions, absolutely.
So and I do. I'm not making religion bad. There's
no, it's not,
because religion makes you be introspective, right?
Yes,
it makes you self-reflective.
There you go.
Yes.
Those are really good traits.
Very
Absolutely.
good. Very good.
And comfort and hope and peace and all those things are
Yeah,
good.
there's plenty of great things you can take away from it.
Everything has a plus and a minus.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
And I believe that we don't give enough energy to the detriment of some religions, or the way that it can socialize us to devalue certain individuals, such as women. Sorry, just got to say it.
No, thank you.
Bottom line. So it's
real.
if we're being objective, certainly we can go into that, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But
Another show.
yes, right.
Yeah. I know we've touched on this mental health thing, and this information, I know. I have chills.
You're incredible.
It's great. It's fantastic. Go ahead.
I do want to. So actually, I wanted to answer you more directly about those boxes.
Yes.
And so something that I think you're gonna enjoy. Yes. Because we have those boxes, we want people to stay in them. So sometimes what happens in what we're talking about, maybe a heteronormative relationship, is that when you male get soft, I don't know how to be in my box anymore. Me female, right? It goes the other way too.
This is good information.
This is
oh my gosh.
Like we're all like, oh dang, that was what that fight was about, right? So on my end, it's when I get too strong, right? So we're like, oh, I don't know how to be like strong anymore because you're being too strong, right? And that's its own difficult challenge.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
So it's those like, I don't know how to operate anymore because this is the only way that I know how to be a man, how to be a woman, how to be a partner, right? How to communicate my emotions.
Yes.
So
yes. Wow.
That is beautiful. Like,
that's heavy. That's profound.
I was really thinking about that. Like,
right. When you just break it down like that, it's like, okay, now I don't know how to behave.
Exactly.
Because now you're not in your box.
Yes.
I like that.
That was rich.
I know, right?
Another show.
Man, I'm telling you. Yeah. So with all being said, before we wrap this up about mental health, when we were talking about the relaxation, you're very profound and super educated. When we speak about meditation, I think people hear that, but they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Layman's terms, how can people meditate?
There are a lot of ways.
Yes.
If there's one thing, I would say it's stillness, right? So it's an intentional stillness.
Okay.
It's kind of, when we think of mindfulness, it's doing something and paying attention on purpose, right?
Okay.
Most people, when they hear meditation, they think of like, I'm sitting there with legs crossed, hands like this, and I'm saying Om, right?
Candles and everything, right?
That's a beautiful way to meditate, and
Certainly.
that's not the only way. Especially what people find hard is this dumping your brain.
Yes.
You don't have to do that, right? So you can meditate working out, right?
Yeah.
So
you know a lot of that.
so actually I'm widowed. My husband, he was a swimmer, and so he would talk to me about when he would swim laps, the meditative aspect he would experience, like kind of also like that hum, that feeling that you would get, right? You're pulling on trance, right? So to break down trance, if you've driven home and you don't remember passing Circle K, the whatever, I shouldn't be giving y'all brands, right? But anyway, whatever local store that's amazing and provides all the equal products. So you don't remember passing the park, whatever your landmarks are, you were in a state of trance. We're in a state of trance all day long. It's levels, but because of the way that in the U.S. or in the West we separated mind and body, we think it's more of like a light switch. I'm only in trance when I'm asleep, or I'm only under or relaxed when I'm asleep. And then what the sad thing is, it makes us think we have to be alert and up, and our energy has to be high. But no, in Eastern traditions or other traditions that connect mind, body, and spirit, you're going through it all day long. Neurologically, you're going through trance all day long. It's just different levels of alertness, right?
Okay. Yes.
So anyway, meditation, it's getting still. It's getting still. It's relaxing. It's trying to access that relaxation response,
Okay.
right?
And so when you're still, what should you be thinking about?
it's hard to still our mind. So most of the time people are thinking about like what they're going to eat for dinner, what they're going to do later, right? So you need to be thinking about being compassionate to yourself, right? Of like, don't beat yourself up for, dang, I suck at meditation right now, right?
Exactly. Right. Okay.
Yeah. You need to just be kind of maybe a posture of gratitude, right? Of like, I'm just appreciating that I'm sitting here.
Yes.
Connecting to your body is actually one of the best things that you can do because your body is always in the present moment.
Exactly.
So our thoughts are often in the future or in the past, right? So when I say connecting to your body, like really feeling, like if we were doing something right now, feeling the seat underneath you, right?
Yes.
Feeling the floor underneath your feet, right? Even we could get even into more details of like, if I asked you to, you could probably feel the laces kind of hitting your shoe. You haven't paid attention to that. You also haven't even paid attention to the temperature or the lighting on you, right? So our brain can only hold so much, right?
Exactly.
But just pull yourself back to like what your body is doing right now. And that's a really good way to kind of begin a meditative practice.
I like that.
It's beautiful. And I know I said that was the last thing. This is the very last thing because, like I said, I'm getting some good information here.
I know.
And because I'm looking right at his poster, Nipsey Hussle. Are you familiar with him? Okay. His loss in the physical impacted, I would say, a lot of people. And I felt like I took it very hard. And I felt as if he was my brother.
Right.
Why do you think, I mean, obviously he was very influential, all these things, but I took it so hard and I felt like I couldn't recover for a long time. And I still think about him a lot because I listen to his music a lot. But why do you think the community, like, I'm trying to pose this question. Like, we obviously didn't meet this person and people die, every day.
Are you asking why are we so connected?
Yes.
Right.
Two things I want to validate. Yeah, I actually think about Lauren London a lot. So with the kind of the widow connection,
Okay, good.
It probably actually makes me not look at it because there's probably some feelings there that I don't want to, kind of attend to. So I'll only like social media for so long on that, and then I'm gonna pray for them and close that off.
There you go. Right.
So as human beings, right? So it's another part of psychology. We have a need to be connected to other people.
Okay.
Visual representation matters. The people who look like us, we're going to feel more connected to them, which is also the opposite. The people who don't look like us, it's why we can other them or be worse to them, right?
Exactly.
So it's that back of like early caveman. I need to be able to protect. I need to know who my people are, right? And I need to figure that out really fast, so that I know how to approach you or avoid you.
Right. Okay.
So we're connected. And then also I think it depends on your identities, right? So like I think of Nipsey Hussle as, well, and I heard, kind of in some of the other things you were saying on the show, I'm sure there's a lot of parts of his identities, like young, entrepreneur, black male, educated, upbringing. I mean, I've heard, just some of your stories, right?
Yeah.
He's a lot like you. You're a lot like him, right? And so, and there aren't a lot of people, the compliment where I got sidetracked, that like are doing all these good things. So you have such few people to kind of look up to, right?
Okay.
And we want to celebrate good things, right? And so he's somebody who is doing something good.
Absolutely.
So belonging, connection is primary. Like it's actually one of the things that separates us from animals, right? So that we have a need for belonging and connection.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. All right.
Mine done, yay. My work's done.
All right, your work is done.
Oh, your work is done.
Check the mail, yeah.
Right?
Oh, man. All right. And so I'm going to use my favorite phrase. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for the day.
Yes, sir.
Want to thank you so much
for
coming on here. And gosh,
this was amazing.
This is great.
Thank you so much.
This will be archived.
Thank you.
I would shake your hand, but you know, I'm just a little uncomfortable with my mic. But with that being said, I want to once again thank everybody for supporting us.
Yes.
We're obviously in our infant stages, getting this thing rolling.
Yes.
Week by week, the support continues to increase.
Yes, it does.
We want to ask that you please share, like, comment, please interact. I don't have a question for you all this week, but we will share some of this show, this content, and please comment and give us your feedback and your thoughts on all this great information that we just received from obviously Professor Anderson and Professor Dr. Lafaurie as well.
Yes.
So with all being said, thank you. Let's wave to the camera. All right. Thank you, and we will see you next time.
All right.